Hi, I would like to spend just a few minutes in our APA manual because often our dissertation students are wondering, what am I supposed to put in this section? And a lot of the answers are found in the APA manual. If you want to take a second and grab your APA manual with me and turn to Chapter 3, you'll notice that Chapter 3 uses the acronym JARS. JARS stands for Journal Article Reporting Standards. And so we're going to take a look at those because they will also help us know what it is that we're reporting in various parts of our dissertation. Let's start with the quantitative dissertation. When I am writing about my research, the abstract will be written last. So you want to skip the abstract to start with, but when it is time to do your abstract, please note that on page 73, there are some standards for a comprehensive summary that will go in the front of your dissertation. In the abstract, it needs to be packed with information, and there are some characteristics that we look for in a good abstract. So APA says it's accurate, it's non-evaluative, it's coherent, it's readable, it's concise. Your problem needs to be stated in one sentence. You need to quickly review your participants or your data sources, talk about how you conducted measurements and basic findings that you found, and then wrap up with a quick conclusion and implication, all in just a limited number of words. So that is found in APA edition 7 on pages 73 and 74 when it's time to write your abstract. But there's so many other parts that you need to write before you get to write that abstract. So we're going to talk about basic reporting standards for a quantitative dissertation. And on page 77, it talks or begins that discussion of what you need when you're reporting about a quantitative study. And there are a couple of charts there that list everything out for you. I want to start on section 3.6 with the standards for methods. Often students are like, what do I talk about in my methodology section? Well, you are just talking about what was done to carry out the study. In any empirical study, there has to be a procedure that was followed. So you're going to talk about your demographic characteristics, characteristics of your participants, and your sample. And in doing that, it's important that you tell readers how you collected your sample, that you describe the settings and the locations of where you were collecting your data. Also in that section, the APA manual reminds us to go over any kind of IRB or Institutional Review Board approvals that you obtained. If you keep going through that section, and I'm flipping through a couple of pages here, it will talk about going over your measurements tools and their validity, and also noting the internal consistency and those coefficients. And your methodologist will help you with reporting that as well. When you're talking about your research design down on the bottom of page 84, it reminds us of some of those terms that we had back in our Introduction to Research class or in our quantitative research class, talking about were your participants, were you using a between subjects design where you've got different people that are taking the test, or were you using a within subjects design where you have the same participants and maybe you did a pre-test and a post-test. There's also some information about how to describe your intervention. Some of you might be doing a pre and post test with some type of intervention happening in the middle, and we need details about who delivered the intervention, such as maybe extra tutoring or help, or some support maybe for those going through a trauma. Whatever the intervention was, talk about that person who delivered the intervention and what's their training, what's their level of training for this specific intervention. And then talking about your data, how were your data collected and how were they examined after they were collected? Were there any outliers? If there was missing data, what did you do about that? That needs to all be described. Your analytic strategies are going to include talking about statistical power. Many of you will remember us talking about G-power analysis. Did your study have sufficient power to be able to detect any type of effect? And also reporting confidence intervals. How confident are you about your scores and your analysis? Under section 3.7, you'll read about the standards for quantitative reporting, and you need to be sure that you're reporting your data enough to justify your conclusions. In doing that, maybe you're disappointed because when you analyzed your data, you had a small effect size. And you're like, man, I worked on this. I've given so much of my life to this study, and I just had a small effect size. Well, I want to encourage you to go ahead and report that small effect size. It's okay. Even when you have non-significant findings, you need to report that. Don't be uncomfortable or try to hide something by omitting it or not including it in your results section. Not finding something significant is a finding. That is a result, and we want you to share it. Page 87 continues with reporting about your analytics. Be sure that you're unbiased and that you are doing a complete job of reporting your analytics. So you've got your hypothesis, or if you had more than one research question, you're going to have some hypotheses, and you're going to report the results for each research question and hypothesis, and you're going to discuss any transformation of data or imputations that any of those kind of decisions that you made when you were running your analytics. And it's okay to assume that your readers are going to have some level of professional knowledge or statistical knowledge as they read your dissertation. And so when you're talking about basic statistical tests that you're using, you don't have to explain them or cite a statistical book for those basic statistical analysis. The bottom of page 87 does talk about what do you do when you have missing data and describe the methods for addressing the data that were missing. The analytical section is going to be different for every dissertation. I mean, sure, there are going to be some similarities between dissertations when the researchers used a t-test of independent means, because there's not that many different ways to say a t-test of independent means. But there are different aspects of what you're going to report based on your analysis. And so yours isn't going to sound just like everybody else in your cohort. If you do a good job talking about your analysis and your results, though, your study is going to become part of that cumulative knowledge on that topic. And how cool is that? So be sure that you're including enough statistical information in that quantitative study to validate your study enough that it's included in future studies, that people can trust it. There's some information there on page 88 about what kind of statistical information you need to include about the magnitude of the test significant, the degrees of freedom, the size and degree of effect, standard errors, confidence intervals, and then it's always fun sometimes when you're analyzing your data, you'll find out something that you didn't even expect to find, or you didn't even expect that was going to be a result. And those ancillary findings can be reported as well, even if it wasn't one of your research questions. And so that's just always fun to be able to include. Then you get to discuss your results. And so under quantitative discussion standards on page 89, APA reminds us that you get to evaluate and interpret your results and talk about the implications. And that's done in our chapter 5 at Southeastern University. That's where you get to examine and interpret and really qualify your results. As the researcher, you're in a position to draw inferences and to make conclusions based on your data. You just want to be sure that there is a tight relationship, and I'm going to read this directly from page 89, a tight relationship between the results that are reported and their discussion. And that's to keep us true as researchers, that we just didn't go off on some rabbit trail with our discussion, but that there's a tight relationship between our results and the discussion of those results. So open your discussion with a statement about your hypothesis and what you thought that you might find. Discuss those results and talk about the similarities and differences between what you found, your results, and other studies that have been conducted in the past. And then talk about your contributions to the understanding of the problem that you were researching. Page 90 talks about the limitations section and also the strengths. Talk about your maybe threats to the validity of your study. Was the intervention carried out with fidelity, or was the researcher maybe noticing that the individual who was carrying out the tutoring or the training didn't quite do it to the level of standards that needed to be done, and maybe that affected the study. Talk about the generalizability of your study to other populations, or maybe that it's not generalizable. And then study implications are covered at the bottom of page 90, going back to why that problem is important. And now that you've added some information to this theory or to the study of this concept, what could be explained, or what models can we come up with because of your results? What problems are still left unexplained and maybe are areas for future research? So a lot of our studies in the EDD program are non-experimental studies, and the purpose was to observe something, to describe something, to classify, to look at naturally occurring relationships. So as you move from your results to your discussion, use the APA manual, chapter 3, to go over those quantitative results. I hope that this information has been helpful to you, and just wanted to tell you how many neat things can be found in this APA manual that are going to help you as you write that dissertation.